Hello everyone, you are watching sqadia.com and we are going through the lecture of development of integumentary systems. And now we have come to the section 4 of this lecture, which is the development of hairs. What we will be covering in this, we will be covering the general aspects of hair, how they develop, and what are the abnormalities of the hair distribution. As we know that I've just covered in the previous section that the actually integumentary systems is the skin and its derivatives, and what those include sebaceous glands, mammary glands, hair, nails, and other appendages as well. So we are coming to the hair, which is one of the derivatives along with the skin. They begin to develop during the third month but do not become visible until the 20th week. They begin as epidermal proliferation, the hair bud into the underlying dermis. Now, if you see in this diagram, as I just told you the previous section, that actually they are formed from the epidermis. They're not from the dermis. Although they eventually come to lie in the dermis, but they are formed from the epidermis, and these cells invaginate into the dermis as you go along. From here, they come down into as a hair bud, as in this section. As they are growing in this, they form as hair papillae over here. What is a hair papillae? This hair epidermal ridge comes down into this, and they form a hair follicle, in which the this epidermis is actually projecting into this hair follicle and forming the hair papillae. Now this is the diagram you see in normal adult skin, that this is the epidermis, this is dermis, and this is the hair shaft, or hair shaft actually protruding out of the skin. Now in a normal adult, you can appreciate that the epidermis is descending and invaginating into the dermis, and this is the covered from the dermal root sheath. Now this forms the hair follicle attached to the erector pili muscle. Now these are the sebaceous glands, which are actually also formed with the epidermis, and they open up into the this funnel shape opening of the hair follicle. And this is the dermis, which is projecting into the hair papilla, the hair follicles forming hair papillae. And why they are important, that these hair papillae is actually providing the nutritional support. The arterioles and the venules are going in, and the peripheral nerve endings are going into this. So the nutritional support to the hair follicle is actually provided from the dermis, but the hair itself is actually formed from the epidermis. The deepest part of the hair bud becomes the cup shaped, forming a hair bulb, which is you can appreciate over here. And this hole is there actually the hair follicle, and this end part is termed as hair bulb. The hair bulbs gets invaginated by the mesenchymal hair papilla, which is actually the dermis itself, which is invaginating into the hair bulb, forming the hair papillae. The central epithelial cells of the hair bulb give rise to the shaft of the hair that grows through the epidermis and protrudes above the surface of the skin. Now this is the diagram, and this is the shaft of the hair, which is protruding through the surface of the epidermis and going out projecting out of the skin. The peripheral cells of the hair bulb form the epithelial root sheath. The cells of the epithelial root sheath proliferate to form a sebaceous gland bud. Now, as I told you, the sebaceous gland and hair follicles and hair itself are formed in the epidermis, and these are formed from the epithelial root sheath, which proliferates to form the sebaceous gland bud. Now this is the diagram, which is showing a normal anatomy of a hair in an adult skin. Now this is the, again coming to the anatomy, this is the outermost layer called as the epidermis. Then there's the middle layer, which is called as the dermis, and the lowermost layer of the subcutaneous tissue and arterioles called the hypodermis layer. If you see over here, as I told you, the nutritional supply is going from the dermis, that these are the arterioles and venules which are projecting into the hair bulb or hair follicle over here, and these are present from the dermis. But look at over here that the epidermis is actually invaginating into the dermis and descending into the dermis deep to form the hair follicle. This is the hair follicle wall. Now these epithelial cells actually invaginate to form the sebaceous gland, which is also formed from the epithelial cells. Now this is the hair bulb, and this hair follicle or hair papilla has been formed by the dermis, and you can appreciate the arteriole and the vein are actually going in and providing the nutritional support to the hair. They are first recognized in the region of eyebrows, upper lip, and the chin. The first set of hairs that appear are fine and colorless and called lanugo hair. In fetus, usually they're very thin hair and usually they're colorless and called as lanugo hair. Lanugo hair are replaced during the perinatal period by a coarser hair. Now, this is important that at skin at birth, when not all the hairs may be normal hairs, but at times there are certain hairs which are very thin and whitish, and they may some of them may have already been replaced, and some may be replaced later on. But gradually, all the lanugo hair are actually replaced by the adult type of hairs. Coming to the abnormalities of hair distribution. Now, if these are different. In hypertrichosis, there is excessive hairiness. In atrachia, there is absence of hairs. Excessive hairiness is caused by an unusual abundance of hair follicles. If there will be a lot of hair follicles, there will be a lot of hairs. It may be localized to certain areas of the body, especially the lower lumbar region covering a spina bifida or colata. Now, this is a disease called as spina bifida, in which there is an abnormality of the lower spine or the spinal cord. In the lower lumbar region, there is opening of the spinal cord because there is not complete fusion of basically all the membranes of the spinal cord. This opening is further covered up by excessive hairiness or excessive the area of the, as you can appreciate over here, that there's especially a tuft of hair, a bunch of hair would be present over here in this area. This is termed as hypertrichosis. Atrachia, the congenital absence of hair, is usually associated with abnormalities of other ectodermal derivatives such as teeth and nails. As you know, as hairs are formed from the epidermis and epidermis is from the ectoderm. So if there's a problem there in the ectodermal formation, then everything all will be affected. Not only hair, the teeth and nails and other ectodermal derivatives all will be malformed or may be absent or partially malformed, that depending upon the abnormality. So in this section, we have covered how the anatomy of hair is formed and what are the abnormalities. We now know that actually it's derived from the epidermis. It's the epidermal ridge starts to come down and migrate into the dermis. As they come down into the epidermis, they form basically the hair follicle. The lower part becomes enlarged and becomes the hair bulb, and this hair bulb is actually invaginated by the dermis, which forms the hair papilla. Hair papilla are providing the nutritional support, while sebaceous glands, which are actually outpouching from the epidermis epithelial cells, they are also derived from the epidermis. Hair shaft derived from the epidermis, while only the hair papilla is derived from the dermis. And what is their role? We have already discussed in this as the previous section that they are attached towards the recti muscle. And what happens is when we are feeling cold, these are sensed by the peripheral nerve endings. Recti muscle contract, resulting in the erection of the hair over our skin, resulting in goosebumps. Thank you very much. You're watching sqadia.com.